Deepak Chopra, and it's my great privilege to be speaking today to Dwight Holbrook, uh, a philosopher whose book, Blink of an Eye, and the material nature, rather, let me repeat. His book is called Blink of an Eye, Material Nature Captured in the Momentary Now. And you can see the book on display there. I have read it and was totally captivated by it. And so it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, Dwight Holbrook.
Okay. May I just ask you an initial question? There's a white square in the middle that says this meeting is being recorded. Continue. Do I click on continue or just leave the message here? It
Just
says
leave the message there, or you can just press continue also if you want.
Okay, I'll press continue so we get rid of that white.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
So my great pleasure now to welcome Dwight Holbrook, philosopher. He's British, but right now he's in Poland. So
actually, I'm an American.
You're American.
Yeah.
Where? So actually, we should start right from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about your life, sir.
Okay, I got degrees in library science and in English as a second language, and one from Columbia, New York, and the other from NYU. And I can say that the library degree came in rather useful in an unexpected way. In Long Island, there was this island that was privately owned since the time of the Revolution, before the time of the American Revolution, and in single family ownership. And then suddenly a person about 40 years ago wanted to make a development on the island. And the Wickhams and I were against this idea, and the Wickham family. So we went to court, and I started browsing Columbia University books, New York University books on ancient law. And the developer declared bankruptcy. So my ego was raised. But we did lose in the lower court. We went to the Court of Appeals. It was a process, but in the end, the owner agreed with the town supervisor, who was a Wickham, not to develop the island. And I can just show you here and that he would not develop. So it's still in single family ownership and the Wickham Claim. So that was a period of my life while I was teaching in New York. Then I came to Poland after that was over. And since about 1994, have been there, and then moved into the university, Adam Mickiewicz University English department. Professor Fishak was the director, and made me a professor, contract professor. So in about the year 2001. So that was fortunate. And I started getting, probing the question of the now in several ways. One was I was sort of dabbling in art and using photography, and I made this scroll about 40 feet long in the main building, hanging from the ceiling. It was a supplicant who, I got this idea from Mesopotamia archaeology, a supplicant at various stages approaching a holy icon. And it's sort of like the stations of the cross that you see in certain churches of the Christ moving toward the crucifixion scene. But how that relates to the subject of the now is that the stages are frozen, and somehow that connected to the way I was beginning to feel about the now, that on the one hand, as what is that? Not Hawkins, but the Dogen from a holy monk from Japan from the 13th century, was talking about the now is both all-inclusive, includes the before and the after, and he called that Nikon. And then he said at the same time is contradictory because the now is somehow divorced, just hanging in the air with no substructure. So I try to deal with that in an article in Analectica Husserliana back in 2002, and well, dabbled further on subsequently in the following years, and have sort of concentrated on this mysterious phenomenon that is so evident in our life, the immediate now. It is, as some people put it, the only thing, the only time we have is really the now. And so that, you know, on the one hand, it is a kind of precondition and to everything else. And that's where I get into this conclusion and discussion in this book. It's sort of contradictory because language is sequential. The now is immediate. So how can one possibly write about the immediate by using sequential language? That was a challenge of this book. And so I've been at Adam Mickiewicz University for the last 25 years and have had the good fortune of getting involved in research on various subjects related to this, and following your discussions, total meditation. In fact, on one page of your book, you talk about a man who has been his part of his brain has been surgically removed. So when the doctor comes in and then steps out for a moment, the doctor, when he comes back again, has to reintroduce himself. Well, in a way, that's sort of like the now, when you take away all the past that's summed up in recognition. And what's left? Well, I think the now includes all that we recognize, but the crucial thing is what's left when the recognition from the past is removed, and you not only see a man for the first time, but do you really see a man at all? What is left? So there's a challenge there for somebody who's trying to focus totally on the now. The point is that the now doesn't have a past. It has memory. Memory is in the present. And we don't live in the past. And that's the thing. We only live in the present. And then further questions get into, well, okay, the present, yes, that's where we are immediately in our subjective and our phenomenological, in our everyday experience. We're in the now and only the now. But of course, we have memory, but that's also in the now. So in a way, Dogen was sort of right in that everything seems to be in this momentary now, even though we think of it in terms of the now belonging to measured time, to sequentiality, and even though that's an abstraction from the direct experience that we have. So anyway, I have been spending most of my life teaching English as a second language and doing this type of investigation on my own. And this came out from the university about 2 years ago. And I don't know what the next step will be, but it's been a very exciting experience.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. How old are you, sir, in human terms?
And there we go, sequentiality. Anyway, I have to say 79. Now, well, let's not get philosophical. 79, I'll leave it right there. Yes.
So, yeah, we should get philosophical. So you're 79, and when you were conceived as a fertilized egg, it was now. And now you're 79, you look very different from a embryo or a fertilized egg, and
Yes.
it is still now. So it is still now, and you said now has no memory. Now is unique, right? Now has no memory. It's unique as an experience, right?
Right.
So if now has no memory and it's unique as an experience, did the past ever occur?
Yes. Uh, the past. I mean, what we can say is that it seems to me empirically we are living only in the present, not in the past. We have this phenomenon called memory, and we have the phenomenon of consensus. We all agree that certain things happen in the past, although as time goes by, history is changed in various ways, reinterpreted, and so it's not a solid foundation in the past. But what we're left with, to try to answer your question, is a past that hinges on memory versus a present that hinges on a precondition to know anything at all. What I mean, the biological group and are doing, as we know, a lot of questions about memory and its relation to brain cells and so forth. And I mean, we can't just live on the now without our bodies. So obviously there must be some necessary ingredient involved in our physical and mental brain activity in order to participate in this now. Does the past exist? Memory exists. I think if we ask the question, does the immediate present experience of the past exist? My answer would be that nobody has had that experience. There are people with extreme trauma who vivid memory, but doctors and I guess most people would say, however vivid, it's a memory and it's not what you're connected to now. This temporal alignment between self and other people and others' experiences. I mean, this gets into the question also about dreams. Some people in idealism advocates that it's all a dream anyway. There's no real distinction between dream and waking up. And this book is focused on the awakened consciousness, this self-other alignment that we have with the world, other people, once we are awake. And in this world that we have consensus about for many aspects that enable us to live together as a society. So that's a very interesting question, the status of the past versus the status of memory. And of course, it's a delicate question. Horrible things have happened in the past, and there are many people that want to keep that memory alive. And it's not just, even though it's not being re-experienced, it's not being relived, it's a very important focus for many people to hold on to memory. Now, the only thing I can say is that nobody has actually gone back and relived that past moment. I did write a book, not published yet, where there is somebody who is able to I guess, forget the word, but he jumps from one place to the other instantly. And scientists are perplexed by this. And they have a kind of device where he is able to relive the past so that the scientists can see, just, did he really? How did he do that? What was his conversation going on when suddenly he moved from one place instantly to another country? And so this is a kind of fictional little rendition of how one could actually relive the past rather than just remember it. The person would start gesticulating and talking. Of course, the investigators wouldn't be in this past moment, but the person being investigated would start talking and moving as if, and describing what he's seeing as if he really there is in the past. I would say that the one case that I come up with in this book of where potentially one could defend the thesis that the past can be relived is from the Bible, actually, the scene where doubting Thomas is touching the Christ. Christ is saying, hey, touch me. You don't believe that I've come back. So what is he touching exactly? He's touching a body that has been a dead body that has wounds. So that's in the past. The touch is in the past. What else? I guess basically you could just say that the touch is in the past, but of course, when Christ is speaking, he's in the present talking. But I mean, it would be something like that where, a very unusual situation for a person to relive the past, even though we use relive all the time in vernacular sense. It would be a case in that situation where one sense is in the present and the other sense of touch is in the past. And as proof that this is the same person. But so that's as far as I get on reliving the past as opposed to memory of the past. And
let me respond to everything you've said, because you've given me an opportunity right now to try and reframe everything you've said.
Yes.
In the non-dual traditions of the world, where the ontological primitive of the universe is not matter and not even mind, but the presence of being or consciousness in its pure form prior to any experience. So in Eastern wisdom traditions, including Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism, fundamental reality is something called pure consciousness before it has modified itself into an experience, whatever that experience is, a mental experience, a cognitive experience, a motor experience, a perceptual experience. There's a ground state of being, which is called pure consciousness, which is equivalent to now. But then that ground state of consciousness, which is equivalent to now, is prior to experience, which means prior to experience of the body and prior to experience of the mind, or prior to experience of the world as a perceptual activity. So in this particular framework, we are already, as you said, in a lucid dream, in a vivid now. So what is happening is fluctuations of consciousness and modulations of consciousness, which is pure and infinite and spaceless and timeless and borderless and irreducible, and ontologically the primitive of the entire universe, is just a presence of being which is formless and therefore ultimately unimaginable, because imagination is in time, thought is in time, and perception is in time. So as soon as thought occurs or imagination occurs or perception occurs, perception being a modulation of pure consciousness, then time is born as an experience. But in fact, it's as much an illusory experience as the body is. The changing body is the anatomical experience of the body, is a changing experience of sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. In fact, in this whole framework, there is no such thing as a body. It's just a modification of perceptions, perceptual snapshots that are strung together like beads. And so each bead is a perceptual snapshot, which gives rise to the experience of the world, experience of the body, experience of the mind, and experience of time. But then the continuity or the storyline is maintained by the presence of being, which is there as presence of awareness, both in between the snapshots and in the snapshots. And that's what we call the karmic identity, which is a storyline. But if you get rid of the story and you're only now, then that is also called, in your words, the awakened being, because the awakened being doesn't identify with time, does not identify with the body, does not identify with the mind, does not identify with birth, does not identify with death, and does not identify with anything in between, is liberated and inherently free from time. And so the expression in the Vedanta is, I am Dwight Holbrook is in time, I am Deepak Chopra is in time, but I am that I am is not in time and is inherently free from all experience, karma, past, present, and future. And what we call time is the recycling of experience and also the evolution of experience, not just the recycling of experience, but the evolution. So when people talk in these wisdom traditions about reincarnation, so what reincarnates is not a person. What reincarnates is the residue of the memory of experience, and that is what we call a person. But in the deeper reality, there's no such thing as a person. There's only being and its modulations recycling and evolving and actually creating at the same time space, time, causality, karma, body, mind, perceptions, and the total universe. And that when we awaken ourselves to this presence in our being, which is actually not even the seer, it is the seer, the seeing, and the scenery all at once before it manifests. It is the observer, the observing, and the observed all at once before it manifests. Then and only then we realize that our true self is never born and is not subject to death. So when we talk about this in our spiritual traditions, very frequently referred to as the conscious agent, which is never born, never dies. Fire cannot burn it, weapons cannot shatter it. It's ancient, it's unborn, and it is not subject to death. Water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, because it has nothing to do with what we call the physical world. And actually, that way, I can totally understand that material nature is captured in the momentary now, but we also recognize that memory and experience is not in the brain, because the experience of the brain is also now as a perceptual experience. So memory and whatever, imagination and the lucid dreams and the vague dreams and the deep sleep are just modulations of now. How's that?
That sounds pretty close to what I'm getting at, but going in directions that I haven't really pursued. But I would say that what I call the now as a precondition gets pretty close to what you're saying is this formless being and existence that precedes forms and recognizable shapes and so forth. It is, interesting how a child born learns to recognize, but you see, we use the word recognize, but there has to be a first time. And that famous colorblind Mary thought experiment brings that out, that she's never, in this thought experiment, she's never seen colors. So she knows everything about colors cognitively and analytically and so forth. But then one day she sees color for the first time, just like a little baby seeing color for the first time or being in the now for the first time. And basically the question is, how is it that she can, we won't say the word recognize, but how is it that she can, no, she must learn something new. There must be something new about it. And yet, but it's not based on past knowledge. So I think we can apply that metaphor to the now, that every now is not based on a now from the past, because the now is only present. And that, I mean, that seems slightly weird because we're so used to measurement and hours on a timeline and sequentiality. And so, and how we can say, we use the word moments, but I mean, when we're in the moment, it's very difficult to decide when it begins, when it ends. Now, I'm not saying that being in the moment is exactly what you're talking about, but certain aspects, I think, formlessness, anything that's recognized based on past experience is not what I'm talking about with the now, and it's closer to what colorblind Mary sees for the first time. Because to me, even though we go by day, and yes, we're constantly experiencing, and we have to admit that the now seems to be ongoing, and tomorrow and yesterday. Nevertheless, yesterday is memory, tomorrow is not yet experienced, and it's like a first-time experience to me. But you have to appreciate by the word now that we're not talking about forms, and that so much of what we experience is based on memory. That's why we're not completely shocked by our immediate circumstances, where everything's recognizable. But it's close to that metaphor that you have of the patient without memory. I mean, what exactly, if he's conscious now, without memory to recognize things, what's left?
Yes, so this is a very important question. It has to do with identity. Identity is a result of the narrative in time of my personal storyline. So who is Deepak Chopra, who's Dwight Holbrook, is based on that narrative, which is in time. But actually, even the present moment experience is a past moment experience in a sense, because by the time, say, you hear my words, they don't exist anymore. By the time you register my image in your consciousness, it's already in the past. So every present experience is actually a past experience. Therefore, there must be some recognition even in the present moment experience. Why is a child never surprised at their existence? Why was I never surprised when I saw the color red for the first time? There must be some residue of memory, and that memory, at least in the Eastern wisdom traditions, is not the brain, because the recognition of the brain is also a memory. And that memory is in what in our tradition we call the Akashic Field, or the field of consciousness, which is formless. And in fact, that memory doesn't even exist till it's actualized by an experience. So I look at you and I say, that's Dwight, because I've met you before, I've seen a picture. But even if I met you for the first time, I would say that's a person. It's not a giraffe, right? So where does that come from? Obviously, it comes from the initial labeling of perceptions when I was a child. But even then, the labeling of perceptions was based on the recycling of memory in the collective consciousness, which is an ephemeral, non-material, not even an information field, because the potential for the recycling of information.
Yes, yeah. Well, the only response I have to that is if a scientist is looking at a subject and investigating the light, the example of the fact that the light takes time to hit the eye. So the argument from that is that therefore everything that really this subject is looking at has already happened, even though it's just a moment ago. So in a sense, the person is living in the past. So in the back of my book, I have one question here, and that is, if fractionally speaking, I am experiencing and living in the past based on the time it takes light to hit the retina of my eyes, is there someone living in the present who is capable of calculating this? So that gets into what I call the precondition, that there has to be some present in order to, somebody has to be in the present in order to calculate what's taking time and what's in the past and what isn't in the past. So there is sort of a paradox, I think, you know, what is your starting point? And
I think, given what you said, then time and timelessness are complementary aspects of being, just like space-time, just like mass energy, just like wave particle. Time and timelessness are complementary aspects of fundamental being or fundamental reality, or aspects, if I may say so, with a little bit of what should I say, little bit of license, that who we really are fundamentally is timeless being that recycles in the matrix of space-time and causality, which are human constructs. And in the deeper reality beyond the human constructs, there's only timeless existence.
Yes, well, my thought on that is this question that the biological group keeps returning to about the Big Bang. And the one argument is, well, you can't even ask what happened before the Big Bang because time began with the Big Bang. So you're contradicting yourself and you've got to keep quiet. No, don't ask about before. You're contradicting. You can't use the word before. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that makes sense or if that's escaping a paradox that some people don't like to raise. But I mean, we can say the Big Bang happened by chance, but I'm beginning to get suspicious of language. By chance, is this, you know, is this a way of phraseology? Something as enormous as this is just by chance. I mean, it's hard to know what the what we're allowed to ask and what we're not allowed to ask in terms of language and in terms of this time. I mean, does time begin? I mean, of course, the scientists many scientists have investigated this, and I think the Hawking, for example, went into this about the beginning of time. Well, it may be solid argument or whatever you want to call it to say that you can't ask what happened before the Big Bang because there was no time before the Big Bang. So that ends the story. But again, maybe time is also pretty mysterious. You know, it can begin, it can stop. And of course, as I said, Hawking and many researchers know a lot more about measured time than I do. And of course, time can slow down, and then the black hole, and apparently there's no time in the black hole. So maybe time does stop and begin. And it's a question that lingers in my mind anyway.
So,
Question.
the way I think about that is that language, human language, is a language for creating models and stories. And so time is a story, and just like physical identity is a story, like all identities are stories, that in the deeper reality, this is not a storyline whatsoever. That's a human construct. I just wonder if other living species, other biological organisms, including apes, worry about the existence of time or have the notion of future or past or concepts like birth and death. These are all storylines, and all stories ultimately are provisional. The most effective story in science, of course, is mathematics, which looks symbolically at patterns of relationships, both visible and invisible. And if we, all the insights that say Stephen Hawking and all these things about black holes originally come from mathematics. And the mathematics there is looking at patterns of relationship that ultimately structure within human consciousness storylines, including the story that we call the Big Bang, and and this the whole sequential language of time. But that is a mathematical language, which in a way goes beyond linguistics in general, and therefore is slightly closer to truth. And mathematics, therefore, gives us access to the nature of timelessness as well. So I think the fact that mathematics is an intellectual activity in consciousness gives me at least the clue that time is conceived, conceptualized, governed, and comes into existence and is regulated by consciousness. And that consciousness, of course, as we experience it, is species specific. So, we as humans have this storyline, and it's our story, doesn't mean it's the only story.
Yes. It would be nice if you happen to know at some point any aliens coming around your neck of the woods to make a little comparison there. But yes, this is constructs. This is not to say that they're false. Obviously, they work in many respects. The geniuses of mathematics have been able to answer many questions. And it seems that, this sequentiality of measured time is crucial in many respects. And well, with the other creatures, I mean, they too are, I guess the more advanced apes and so forth, they have a sense of anticipation. They have memory. So to a certain degree, they have a certain type of timeline, not in any measured sense. One of the images from the biological group show these apes in, I forget what country, somewhere in the East, but apparently we're capable of stealing not just apples, but pocketbooks, things that they seem to know were very valuable for the tourists. And it seems to be that they had pretty advanced sense of value. So anyway.
Dr. Holbrook, other species are part of the human dreamscape. They exist in our consciousness alone. I don't think a giraffe knows that it's called a giraffe, or an eagle knows that it's called an eagle. They have their own experiences, and which we are trying to guess what their internal experiences are. But they appear on the screen of human consciousness as those particular forms and as those particular phenomena. And we don't realize that just like we created latitude and longitude and Greenwich Mean Time and Wall Street and nation states, these are all human constructs that, in fact, maybe through our constructs, we have created the, through our constructs, maybe
truer concepts.
Through our constructs and concepts, we are the creators of the total universe.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not quite sure I grasp that point. Maybe our constructs are truer constructs. What were you saying?
Our constructs shape the experience of the universe, but there is no such thing. It's all a construct.
I see. Yes. So
the total universe.
Nothing outside of the constructs. Yeah. But the constructs keep changing and get modified. Scientists have the impression that they're getting more efficient at finding the real nature of certain things. So it seems that the constructs are getting refined. But on the other hand, if we end up blowing each other up with our missiles and so forth, it may be that actually there was something very wrong about these constructs. It's hard, it depends on what position you want to take in terms of are they effective, or what is the value system that's behind the development, for example, of all this technology and internet and so forth, and all the gossips that are going.
I do agree that the constructs keep getting refined, and they also work. We make jet planes and we make planes. Yes. But that doesn't mean that they are true. They're just upgrading the already existing virtual reality that we inhabit.
Yes, right. I agree. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So this has been a very interesting conversation. I think it's very liberating. I'd like to call it, if you agree, Timeless Existence, and then colon, the title of the book along with the subtitle of the book, if that's okay with you.
You mean you're talking about this book?
Yes.
Yes. Very nice. Okay. I appreciate that, and thank you very much.
We'll send you a link to all the sites where this can be seen.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Deepak,
thank you very much.